Hey everybody, welcome to Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. We are coming to you as always courtesy of our broadcasting partner moretalk.tv. This week on the show, we are diving into the ARE archives with a presentation from Elsie Sechrist as she discusses meditation, the art of listening. For those who are unaware, Elsie Sechrist actually knew Edgar Cayce personally and received several readings from him during her lifetime. Her book, Dreams Your Magic Mirror, started thousands on their journey of dream study and interpretation and is still available online today at arecatalog.com. This book, based on more than 20 years of dream research, it provides compelling evidence of the importance of dreams and symbols in everyone's life. She is also the author of Meditation, Gateway to Light, a personal favorite of mine. It's a comprehensive guide to meditation and how to interpret and work with dreams that result from meditation. Hope everyone enjoys our presentation from the archives today with Elsie Sechrist on meditation.
Read about, but really didn't understand. And along came this man, Edgar Cayce, who had a very unusual gift, who went into a state of rare silence in order to tell you and me something about the mysteries of our being. And he unveiled to us the mystery of this silence and the mystery of our own being, the silent parts of our being that we understand so little about nature, about life, about our origin, about our destiny. And he made a very flat-footed statement where meditation was concerned. And seldom was he dogmatic. But he did say that every soul must sometime, somewhere, learn to meditate. Learn to be silent and still in body, in mind, and in spirit, in order that he might become aware of the God force within him. Now, every religion teaches the kingdom of God. Jesus designated it as being within, not in a house built by man, but within ourselves, and that this is the temple of the living God. Now, you and I know from psychology and from the problems of today that the greatest problem in the world is lack of communication. Poor communication between husband and wife can break up that marriage. Between children and parents brings great destruction. And so we know the importance of communicating. But what about the importance of communicating with our Creator, with our Maker, with He who created all of this world around us, the heaven and the earth and the stars and all of the mysteries and all of the beautiful mystical experiences that we read about in the lives of the saints and the mystics? I'm sure every one of us here realizes the importance of this communication, of understanding from a first-hand point of view that communication is possible. Do you believe these stories that the mystics have written? Their experiences of cosmic consciousness in which a voice spoke? What do you think about the experiences of Jesus? And before Jesus, of others who went beyond the norm in hearing a voice that spoke to them out of the silence, or spoke to them out of a light, or in a dream or a vision? Do we think these people were very unusual, unusually pure? According to Edgar Cayce, even the disciples, when they were chosen, were not one whit better than most of us today. But they did have an ideal and a desire. They wanted to serve God. So according to these readings of Edgar Cayce, the open door for you and me is this desire to know our source, to know who we really are, where we came from, and what our destiny is. And silence is the place where we may meet our Creator, in the silence. So meditation is developing the art of silence, stilling the physical body first, and then the mind and the spirit. Now, you may say, well, now, I understand how we still this physical body. You just sit still. Well, have you ever tried to really sit still? No wiggling, No fixing of your hair, no scratching, no moving about. Try it sometime and see how much control you have over your physical body. If you haven't worked at meditation, you will be greatly surprised at how little control you have. To sit absolutely still with your spine straight in a comfortable position, not a slouching, not sleeping. You may even have to get on your knees to be comfortable and to be alert. I have very bony knees, so I just can't do that. That's my excuse anyway. Others get into meditation quickly. They get on their knees. Is it possibly because they were monks or nuns in the past life and they spent a lot of time on their knees? And so this brings them into a position quickly of being able to attune to the source of life. But these are experiments that you must try in order to find the best way for you. But stilling the body is the first and important thing. Stilling the spirit, the mind. The spirit, this is stilled by having an affirmation or a prayer that is given you in a search for God. And really to try to work at meditation by yourself is almost impossible. Groups are able to help one another because we're all at different levels of stillness or of attunement. And the stronger will help the weaker. And so there's strength and protection in a group that works together at meditation. So the spirit is stilled by having an ideal, in that there's a oneness of purpose in using the same affirmation when you're working in a group. Perhaps the one that I like so much is the one, create in me a pure heart, O God. And it goes on, there are just a few more words to this. But this very first statement is an ideal which all of us know we need. So it stills the spirit in knowing that this is the purpose for this quieting of the body and the mind and the soul. And the mind then, to keep it focused on this, will be one of the most difficult things for you to practice. There are many things that you can practice in your daytime that will help you to still the mind so that you are in control. Such as when you're shaving in the morning, think of nothing but shaving. Don't let your mind wander as to what you're going to do later in the day. When you're washing dishes or making the bed, think of nothing but washing dishes and making the bed. Don't let that mind wander. You'll be amazed at first of how little control you have over this mind. But it must be still if it will listen. You know you can't listen to what your husband's saying if you're busy thinking what you're going to be doing the next minute. You scarcely hear what he has to say, let alone really understand what he's saying. Not so much with his words, but what he intends by the spirit with which he's saying these things. So basically this meditation, this art of meditation, is stilling the body, the mind, and the soul with a purpose of knowing what God would have you do. Now meditation begins to focus a light on the inner self. Your idea is that you want to know yourself as God sees you. Not as you and I think we are, or someone else thinks we are, but as God sees us. And this light begins to focus on us then, as we sit in silence. Now this art of silence that I want to talk about in meditation is a very dramatic and wonderful thing. Because those of us who've studied the records, and those of you who've done some research, know, for instance, that the greatest forces in the universe are the unseen forces. The most powerful forces are the unseen voices. The most important messages and voice that will ever come to you is a voice that is unheard by most other people. In the cosmic conscious experiences, others present don't see, they don't hear, but you hear in another dimension, because meditation sensitizes you so that you move into another dimension. You know, when we talk about God, you may meet some people who are still at this level that, having had so much formal education, intellectually speaking, just cannot comprehend God. And you may even have to give them the steps in which, from an intellectual point of view, they can move in order to even begin their meditation. Now, these are the same steps that a scientist takes. You must start with a hypothesis that a thing is possibly true. In this instance, that maybe there is a God, as all the religions claim. So this is an open mind which prepares the way. The second step is that you must begin to do those things which will prove or disprove this theory. Well, now, as far as God is concerned, all of the religions tell us practically the same thing. And that is that we begin to pray, that we begin to listen, that we begin to look for avenues of service to our fellow man. Now, it is this quickening of the spirit, it's this movement in consciousness, it's this beginning of listening or developing a sixth sense, because we know God's not right here as such, as a person, but that he is a spirit in consciousness that we must develop by moving forward in our own consciousness. And so as we move forward in consciousness, and that's the only way we really move, we begin to move into that country or place or space or whatever you want to call it, where God dwells. You move in consciousness to where he is by doing those things which are godlike in relationship to your fellow man. And then you begin to experience his presence. And then no one can ever tell you that God does not exist. You may never be able to explain it. Could you ever talk to those shepherds the night that they heard the angels sing, proclaiming the coming of the Christ, and tell them that they were misguided, that they did not hear the voice of the angels, that they did not see his light? Not everyone saw that light. Not everyone heard the angelic chorus, but they heard it. And when you begin to hear, even once, this voice that speaks to you in love and kindness, and you know from within that it is the voice of God, you might, like I would, because I'm a coward where pain is concerned, recant if you put me on the wheel like Galileo was put on the wheel. But inwardly, I would still know that this was a real and valid experience. And so as you move in consciousness, in your meditation, in your daily activity, you expand your ability to listen. The art of listening is an all-inclusive art. It has very little to do with hearing each other's voices. You know, it isn't what a person says. Why he says it is far more important. And if you have worked at meditation, you gain a great deal more about what the motivations of that person are. And you know how to respond in a helpful way. You, in your listening, you know what Cayce said listening is? He said listening partakes of the sixth sense. And in this sixth sense, we see, we feel, we hear, we smell, and we're aware on many different dimensions. So it's another sense of man that develops when he puts himself aside and wants to hear what God, or the God in all the people whom you meet, is really saying to you. You not only begin to become aware of the people, what they're saying, what their hurts and their aches are, but where they stand in relationship to God. Or perhaps how they feel about you. Now, this sensitivity is not going to come until, and it won't be helpful, until you seek to help your fellow man. Because unless you're seeking to improve yourself, how much would it help you to know that that person standing in front of you doesn't like you one single bit? You know, it would really discombobule you. But when you do, you also know why and what it is about you that irritates them. And if you're striving to do the right thing, you will go out of your way to soften whatever that quality is within yourself that that person doesn't like, although it may be a reflection within them. You will find also that as you listen, you will hear a great deal more in the world outside of yourself. As Cayce said, have you ever listened to a tree growing? Have you ever felt the nature of a tree? One of our disciplines in our study group work is to sit next to a tree touch it with your hands or let a part of your skin touch it. For heaven's sakes, don't do it in front of your neighbors in the front yard. You know, if you're in this work, they already think you're queer enough. So go in the backyard and do this. And listen. Listen to what that tree has to say to you. We did this in one of our study groups, and everybody came up with a different experience, but all were wonderful. Now, did you expect a message? The tree was going to say, "You're leaning on me too heavily," or something like this? Well, maybe if you were really bruising it might. But no, we didn't have this kind of experience because our purpose was to feel God in this tree. And one person was so amazed and so grateful because as they touched the tree and waited and entered into the tree, they suddenly became aware of the meaning of Schweitzer's statement, the reverence for life. For an instant, they felt that they had their hands on God. Now, unless you've experienced it, you really can't even comprehend it. We've touched trees all of our life without any sense of reverence, perhaps. Another felt the life force flowing through that tree and became a part of that tree. Another felt the strength and the fulfillment of purpose to be beautiful, to bend with the wind so it wouldn't break, to meet whatever the circumstances were. And they were all wonderful experiences. And a tree has never been the same to these people who took time to work with this. In one of our disciplines, in one of our retreats in Texas one year, 6 or 8 of us women decided that we would walk for an hour and a half beside a lake and see how many sounds we could hear and not speak one word. Can you imagine 8 women together for an hour and a half not saying one word? We walked beside that lake, looking and observing. And there was one moment when we almost lost our poise because there was a fisherman standing by the lake. And he could not understand it. 8 women walking without talking. Not only did we walk by him, but then we came back a half hour and not one of us was talking. I'm sure he went home and told his wife he saw 8 deaf mutes walking along the lake. But what a report we had to give when we came back of the voices of nature that we had never heard before, of the sounds interpenetrating the waters as they gurgled down the lake, of the different birds, of the grass, of the wind, and the different sounds of the wind as it went through the trees and through the grass and through the lesser bushes, and the silence of one another. And you can hear the silence. So this development of this art of listening as you work in meditation isn't just in meditation. It increases your ability to hear things in music that other people don't hear. You tune into the artist that wrote that music. You feel the heart of the person or the heart of the people who are playing the various instruments. You tune into their very well-being. Have you ever been house hunting after you've been in meditation for many years? You just walk through a house, and that house speaks to you, and you know almost immediately whether you want to live in that house or don't. For you know this wall that seems so solid, you know it's primarily space. Blobs of energy, just like you and I are blobs of energy, but primarily space. And in those spaces are the activities of the people who lived in that home. If you were to be blindfolded and were taken from a prison to a church, no one would have to tell you which building you had entered. You would feel it because the very walls would speak to you. You get this sensitivity of God in all things, and He reveals all things. For your protection, for that which you need to know in order to move forward in consciousness. We're living in a universe that is full of voices of all kinds. What are you attuning yourself to? You know, if you're studying the Cayce readings, you will be warned and guided as perhaps nowhere else, because Cayce has come in contact with people of all dimensions of consciousness. On the other side when he's out of the physical body, when he was out of the physical body, as well as in this dimension. And you will begin to hear what you're seeking really in life. You want to hear the voices of the dead? Well, they'll come into your life too, if this is your aim. But why call upon the voices of the dead, as Cayce would say to you, when the voice of God, of the Master, is waiting to answer you? Why seek a lesser consciousness when the greatest is available? And yet many of us get caught in these inter-between dimensions. Why? Because we're so impatient. You know, you can so easily get a Ouija board to move, especially if you've got a lot of energy, or the pencil to write. But who do you think is doing the wielding? Somebody who is in one of the heavenly planes, working with the Father in the angelic kingdom to help his people? Or one who has not left the earth plane because he's so involved with the material things, the physical appetites? Which one of you will put a sign on your door of your home saying, anyone who wants to give me advice, come into my house? None of you would do that today in your own home. And yet many people feel that the voice or the personality who's moving that pencil, who begins then to speak, it usually starts with a pencil, and then other movement, and then you hear a silent voice. No one else hears it, but you hear it. Why? Because you've attuned yourself to that level. Your impatience in waiting for the Lord to move has made you hear a lesser voice. And it always begins with great truth, things that you believe in, else you wouldn't listen. And it always takes on the personality of somebody famous and great, else why would you listen? If you are a writer, of course, it has to be Shakespeare, has to be Emerson, somebody great. Because if you simply said you're Elsie Glutz, who's going to come to hear Elsie Glutz? Of course, if you're an artist, it must be Da Vinci. It must be Michelangelo. And then you soon get a circle around you, and you think that you are great. And the voice tells you that you're wonderful, that you have been chosen, and God help us, to start a new religion. That's just what we need, is a new religion. We have too many religions already. And then, as Cayce said, the pat on the back. You know, whenever it tells you you're pure to the last drop of blood in your body, don't believe it. Surely you don't believe it. Even if you've just been married and your husband tells you, hey, you're just an angel. For the time being, yes. So are you attuned to this voice that is going to build up our ego? We know we don't need that. None of us need to have our ego built up. We're all a little too egotistical already. So why are we going into this? So what are we attuning ourselves to? If it is the voice of God, we know it need pruning and trimming. And anything that comes that quickly for most of us, unless it calls for greater discipline, for more sharing with others, be very wary of those voices. As the saints and mystics have said, it is the still, small voice within that is the safest and the least suspect. That we recognize perhaps in the beginning as the voice of conscience. All of us have heard this voice, and all of us have turned away from it many, many times. As Cayce put it, and it really hurts, he said, there isn't a single one among you who wouldn't stay home if you knew the Master was coming this day to visit with you. And yet, he speaks to us through the voice of our conscience every day, and we turn away. So, the still small voice, which you would hear, perhaps begins for you and me with listening a little more carefully to this still small voice. And then it begins to speak more often. And then as you begin to spread yourself in service to others, you find that this voice begins to help you to help others in finding their voice. You know, there are two definitions, and I dislike definitions, but there are two definitions in the Cayce readings that I think everyone should write across their forehead, because they will be as a guiding light in the many paths that will confront you in this life and in every life. And I think a sure and safe sign. The one is truth. Now, in seeking for truth, even today, if you live in California, as I did in one time, as I say, God help you. Every religion in the world is found in California. And everyone, and every branch of every religion, and everyone says, here, we have the truth. This is the way. Many have mysteries, and you can only get them after you've taken a certain number of lessons. But all of them have the truth, and they're going to save you. I don't know what they're going to save you from, but they're going to save you. So how do you know the truth? How do you know the truth for yourself? Cayce gave a definition that I think applies to every single one of us. He said, truth is that religion, that organization, that church, whatever, that leads you to the divine within yourself and its purposes with you. Isn't this what the Christ did? Isn't this what all great teachers do? They lead you to the awakening of that divine, that divinity within yourself, that Spirit of God that lies within. And it speaks to you. It becomes the director. Isn't this what Jesus said, of myself I do nothing? It is the Father within. And the other definition, truth and faith. Faith is an inner knowledge of God based on experiences. Can anyone take this away from you? Can anyone give it to you? We all had it once upon a time because we were all created in the image of God. We knew our origin, but we wandered away. If we're born with faith, it means that this is a carryover from previous experiences. We still remember. For instance, I know from an experience that I had, not one that Edgar Cayce gave me, that I was a part of the Exodus. And I know why, because of this recall, why I know that all of the miracles in the Bible are true. I have known it ever since I studied the Bible, ever since I went to Sunday school. I have known these were true, exactly as they're reported. But as Cayce said, if you lived at any one of these very crucial periods, or if you lived during the time of the Master, which I did not, but others did that had readings, and you were touched by the Master, you would in all lifetimes be in some way a witness for him, because deep down within would still be a memory of this experience. And so in this movement in consciousness of faith, of experiences, of hearing the still small voice, which will begin to speak in many ways, these are evidences of your closeness to the origin of your own being. First of all, as Cayce has pointed out, perhaps this still small voice, this listening, will come to you more and more often through your dreams in answer to problems. And these may come in various ways. First of all, perhaps in symbology, which is the common way. And then more and more, you will get simple messages or biblical pages to look into or chapters that you must look up or a phrase from a book that will give you a direct answer. And as these lessons in living come, these are as much the messages from the higher self when you again, and always, you must compare them with the highest of ethics and the best that you know. Because you know more than one person had a voice or a message in his dream that told him to go kill his mother-in-law or mother. The fact that he'd been quarreling with his mother perhaps never entered his mind. But he thought it was the voice of God. Now, so whatever voice you hear, whatever messages you begin to receive, remember to use common sense in measuring whatever you get with the highest of ethics, because there are often parts of our own unconscious that are still fretting, that haven't been cleansed, that may break through and begin to speak to us. But in the movement forward in your listening then, as you listen more and more to what the unconscious of people are saying to you, of what the voices in nature are saying to you. You begin to truly tune in to the body of God in this whole universe. I find that as we move forward, the problems that we have, if we will listen, let's say we're confronted with a problem. If you will go within and listen, you will hear the answer. Hear it in what? Not words, and yet a message that all is well, you need not worry. Or if it relates to a specific, my husband used to be in the automobile business. Whenever he had a car stolen, he would call me, and I would be silent, and I would say to him, well, I'm sorry, but this one you'll never get back. Or another one, it won't be gone long, you'll get it back soon. Or, well, this one will be gone quite a long while, and it'll come back to you. And this always passed. It was always true. It was due to a listening, a concern, a trying to help it. Somehow it helped him to know whether he'd ever get it back, he'd stop fretting about it, or whether it was soon going to come back and he wouldn't lose it entirely, or whether it was going to come back, in 2 months, 3 months, or whatever. You find that that still small voice works with you where healing is concerned in the physical body. If there's something that needs to be done now, you will have this feeling. And then you may ask in prayer, in meditation, for it to be revealed to you in dreams. My husband receives many things in dreams that helps him in his physical body, as do other members of the study group activity. This is another way in which the still small voice speaks to you. As Cayce has suggested, all of the information, all the different types of information that he had given to us by going into this trance state, you and I can reach for ourselves, for our loved ones, for the people for whom we care, if we're willing on an everyday level to go out of our way. And then we extend these senses of ours. What is ESP? What are the gifts of the Spirit? Isn't there a biblical statement that talks about the 5 talents becoming 10? So that your sight, if it is used correctly today, and what do we mean by correctly? Looking for the good in people. When you read the headlines, look for that as good. Read the headlines, of course, but don't read every gory detail of those things which are negative, unless you're a lawyer and have to defend the case. But read more of the positive, constructive things. Look for that which you can do to help. And then your sight will be extended to clairvoyance. Your hearing, what are you listening to now? To those things that you can aid, that you can improve in life? You know what Cayce said about people who often lose their hearing very early in life. They don't want to hear what other people have to say. And older people especially, they don't want to hear what this young crowd has got to say. And you really turn off your hearing. But you don't have to. So what are you listening to today? Do you listen to someone who's criticizing you? Or do you close yourself up inside? And you can watch yourself. Remember that you are turning off your hearing when you do that. Every time that you don't want to hear what somebody has to say who's criticizing you, you're turning off your hearing. And you may one day find yourself deaf, slowly but surely. But if you're listening, you may not like it. You may make a face, but if you're really listening, see how much truth there is in this. And then your hearing may be extended to hear other things that are unsaid, unspoken. Things that warn you of dangers to come. I was driving down Hollywood Freeway. Who lives in Hollywood here? I've forgotten now. But anyway, any of you who live in California know what that Hollywood Freeway is like. Unless you're driving 70 miles an hour, you're left way behind. And if you're not in the right lane when you want to make a right, God help you. Well, anyway, I was driving down the Hollywood Boulevard with somebody down the freeway. And all of a sudden, I heard a voice. And it said, stop. Well, you know what it means to stop when you're driving 70 miles an hour without putting your hand out or flashing? But when it said stop, I knew I better stop. I stopped. And I could hear all the brakes. I didn't hear the cursing that accompanied those brakes. But I'm sure there was some of it that went on. And I didn't know why. And as I stopped, I saw why. This trailer truck with several trailers had cut too closely in front of me. and I was next to a wall. And if I had continued, I would have been crushed between one of those trailers and probably pushed over the wall. So if you're listening, if you're attuned to the inner voice, in order that you may be corrected, in order that you may be of greater service to others, you're going to have protection of things that you are unaware of on these many different levels. So the hearing, it may come through the hearing. As I said before, you shouldn't want to tune into the dead, but if you could be of service in that way, then attunement will be there also. Now, I certainly do not look for the dead, but I've had several occasions where messages have come to me from people who have passed on, who needed to get in touch with somebody living. And I was able to give a message that was very important to them. And this is because it was of service. But I certainly don't intend to contact the dead. But it's a very wonderful experience to know that your mother is living, to know that she's happy, that she's moving on in consciousness on the other side, and to be also aware when she's been reborn, because she embraces you, kisses you, and says, goodbye, I'm about to be reborn, so I won't be talking to you again. To have these proofs, because you're moving in these dimensions, to hear these things, expands your ability to help other people. So the hearing becomes the clairaudience. What do you use your hands for today? To serve? To write letters of help? Of apology when necessary? To pat somebody on the back who is sorrowful? Then there will be the sensitivity that will come so that you may heal somebody. That in shaking hands, you'll know a great deal about a person, and you develop what we call psychometry. So all of these senses, as Cayce pointed out, if you're using them now, the senses that the Lord God gave every one of us, this sensitivity of hearing, of feeling, is extended into other dimensions. So that the hearing is this all-embracive sixth sense. That you can hear the illness in people. You can hear the sorrow in people, though they say nothing. But you know they're hurting somewhere, depending on the tone of their voice. You can hear a voice that's very soft and gentle, and yet as tight as a wire. You can hear another voice that's shouting, but there's a lot of tenderness behind it. If you're listening for the good, for the whole, and all of these become a very constructive experience. Those of us who had the opportunity of listening to Edgar Cayce as he gave the readings, not only listened to this man as he spoke in great tenderness almost all the time. I think only once or twice did he seem to be a bit annoyed with what he was meeting in giving a reading for another individual. And one day I was present when Michael, the archangel, spoke through Edgar Cayce. And incidentally, in Dallas, Texas, I think, some years ago, it's one of those nights when I was just making a lot of fluffs when I was speaking. And we had been talking about many things. Among them, people were asking about vegetarianism. And I had said, well, I have to honestly say that if it depended on us gals to go out and I want to say butcher the animals, and it came out bitcher, we wouldn't be vegetarians. Well, the audience, of course, was in hysterics with my word. And then the next question, this was the question and answer period, somebody said, well, you talked about Michael. Now, what did Michael say? And I said, well, Michael said, he opened up with, bow your heads, ye sons of, and all of a sudden I remember the fluff I had just made. The audience caught on also. And finally, after the laughter subsided, I said, ye sons of men, which is what Michael said. But what I started to say was, now Michael's voice, I don't know if anybody else here, was anybody else here present at any time when Michael spoke? May? Well, and you too? Now, I don't know whether you all felt the way I did. I didn't feel the gentleness of Edgar Cayce, because this voice went, bow your heads, ye sons of, and I could feel the walls just caving in. Now, maybe it was my own guilty conscience. I don't know why Michael spoke in that way, but that tone of voice just lashed every one of us that was there. It was as if and of course it would be good to get everybody's experience, it was as if he saw into every shadow in our lives and was pointing it out. At least this was my reaction, and was pointing it out to me so that I had to look at myself right at that moment. Now that would be a very difficult situation for us if we were faced constantly with having to look at ourselves. Now this still small voice that we begin to develop that speaks to us in dreams and visions in our daily activity does not lash out at us, because it is prompted by the voice of God within. And it only releases to us that which we can look at. Now, it is true that if we constantly defy doing that which is constructive, we reach the place where we cannot bear the voice and the light within. And we end up a psychopath. We escape from this light because we cannot stand its challenge. This is what Cayce indicates in this fastest growing illness in America, mental illness. So the light that we seek in meditation, in the stillness, in the silence, it brings its strength of all of the voices of nature, of the unseen forces, that even as we're walking in the forest, we can feel this strength. If you're tired, as I was in San Francisco, somebody took us up to the mountains, and we just sat in a grove of redwood trees. The strength from those trees just invades every cell of your body and floods your being, renewing you with energy. The life force that comes from all of nature is yours if you're open. Now, another person can walk and get absolutely nothing. Are you open to the unseen forces of God? Do we realize that it is in the silent voice, the silent prayer, the silent emanations, that the greatest power is contained? In the prayer, in the meditation that you send forth, in the silent goodwill that you share with others? This is the great power. Not that which we talk about, not that which we give and want everybody to see. This doesn't bless us. But in our work at meditation, where we move closer to this great light, which begins to enter into us, this is the power, this is the source, this is the stillness and power of God. And we're a part of this spirit, a part of this light, yearning to enter every cell of our body. You know that in every atom of your body, at the heart of it, there's a tiny pinpoint of light from which all energy radiates. And it's this light that expands within the physical body. You know, the Bible says, if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. Now, this means not only a singleness of purpose, but it also means if we heed and build up this I am that I am, you know, the one I am, then this light within does expand. And in this light is the voice of God. We know as science progresses how it's discovering the miraculous nature of this body of ours. The code that is given in every cell of this body, the RNA and DNA factors, that what we think is just a hunk of flesh, has been dynamically imprinted by the divine with a message for productivity. And it goes out to do this work, to fulfill its commands, unless interfered with by the person. This is true of all of nature. These are the unseen forces. These are the unseen voices of nature that move forward constantly to build, to improve. And this is what you and I can tune into. We all thought Edgar Cayce was magnificent because he gave us an insight, a peek into what we really are. I was talking to May. Now, May probably knows these records as well as anybody. And she says every day She is astounded as she sees a little phrase here or a sentence there that gives her another insight into the magnificence of this world and of us. How many of you have even dared to believe that we were made in the image of God? We can't even comprehend this. Comprehend the might and the beauty and the power. We can't even get an insight into this. And yet throughout the Bible, we see his promises. Try me and see if I will not open the windows of heaven and pour out such blessings that you cannot contain them. In the Gospel of St. Thomas, writings that were discovered some years ago and translated from Egypt, you find that one of the statements that is made after a person begins to work at the silence, that he begins to stand in awe of the great mercy of God as God begins to use the individual with just one sincere desire to help his fellow man. For we are his channels, his hands and feet in the earth. He has no others. Many of you probably heard the story of Rasmus, who had just built a home and a garden. And the minister next door came out and said, Rasmus, you and the Lord sure have a wonderful garden there. And Rasmus said, you should have seen it when the Lord had it all to himself. Now, the same thing is true about this physical body, of this world of ours. Will we allow him to use us? Will we listen? You know, it only requires 15 minutes of stilling this body and listening, and then listening more to what other people have to say. Listen instead of talking. Listen as you're sitting in an airplane. Listen to what other people have to say. See what you feel. As you tune into these deeper sensitivities, you have tremendous opportunities, because what you begin to sense and feel about these people, you can pray for. Now, you know, we may fool one another, but we cannot fool the divine within. It knows exactly why we want to know and how much we want to help. And as we begin to be of greater service, going out of our way, these sensitivities grow. And time and space are not limited to the telephone or to the airplane or to the wire, but are as one when love is the transmitter. Now, you know, we're going to be talking about a little bit about Russia tomorrow night and showing you pictures. The thing that thrills me so much about their discoveries is that they are verifying through their instrumentation so many of these wonderful things that Edgar Cayce talked about. The oneness of all life, not just human beings, but of all life, of God moving through this whole universe, of this whole world being the body of God, of electricity being, as Cayce said, the body of God, the mind of God working in all living things. How many of you believe in fairies and elves and gnomes? I know people who saw them all of their childhood. And one lady was telling me that she suddenly realized that other people didn't see them. You know how old she was before she realized it? 18. She wondered why her boyfriend scurried when she'd ask him if they saw the fairy there underneath that bush. She soon learned that they didn't see them. But her own brothers and sisters, they all saw them, their family, that saw the little creatures, the little elves, and communicated with them as Edgar Cayce communicated with them. Now, you may not see them. I tried awfully hard to see the leprechauns while we were in Ireland. I thought I felt their presence, but I didn't see them. But still, I'm sure that they're there. And the lady in whose house we stayed, I'm sure she saw them, because she was very much like one herself, a delightful person. These are the many different realms that Edgar Cayce saw and talked about in his conscious state and in his unconscious state. Who can explain in words that we could understand the realms through which he moved, that he described in worldly terms so we could understand, but that were places of inhabitation, places of great silence for some people. Silence to us. Can we believe that we're surrounded by myriad worlds and myriad numbers of people? He says when you die, you don't go anywhere. You move merely in consciousness. Do you know what that means? Well, you've probably experienced it. I know I've been sitting sometimes and suddenly I'm aware of my husband say, Elsie, where are you? Well, I'm sitting right beside him, but I've been reading. I've been lost. I've moved away in consciousness. He said, I've called you 3 times. Are we aware of these worlds around us? You can if you will be of help. Cayce was. He could see the people who'd moved on. He knew the worlds through which we moved. He was able to help many who had moved on, who were moving on. I'm sure at night he helped many to make transitions. Do you hear their cries for help? What do you do when you go to bed at night? Are you so exhausted that you want to do nothing except sleep? Or can your body rest, perhaps, and then the soul travel out and help others? I think it can. Many of us have experiences like this, and Cayce said they were valid experiences, where we work with people in other dimensions according to our desire to help them. Now, this is the world in which we live. And there are people who don't even know about it, who have never even dreamed about tuning into it, of discovering the tremendous beauty that lies behind this, the many colors that interpenetrate this gray air of ours. As you move in consciousness, you see these colors. You see them emanate from plants. You see them as they bring messages to you of hope, of beware. If you walk into a room and somebody's about to propose something that sounds very good, and it may not be good at all, you may see black spots breaking out in the room all over. If it's good, you may see white spots or golden spots. All of these are signs, are helps. And they all result from this movement in consciousness as you want to listen to what the divine has to say to you. The art of listening, of stillness, is the secret of moving into the dimension where God resides. For he doesn't speak in the loud, thunderous voice or in the storm or in the wind, but he speaks in the still, small voice. Thank you. If you had any difficulty in your meditation or any questions that I might be able to answer? Yes, ma'am. Yes, the question is that some people feel that your mind is blank, and I speak about listening. If you just keep your mind blank, you're not going to get anything. A listening is an intent state, very much like when the telephone rings, you say hello, and you listen. It's a stilling of all of the 5 senses as related to the outer world and concentrating them on the inner in a listening state. It's like trying to remember something. You know, this is an active state, and it takes willpower to keep it focused, to listen. It isn't one of these, and you say, here I am, Lord. You're not going to get anything. You need enthusiasm. Now, enthusiasm is very important, as Cayce has said. Now, one way to build up this enthusiasm is to read the lives of the saints. See what happened to them in their periods of silence, how it guided them. And there has to be this enthusiasm is full of God. You know, if you go over here and you say, well, I wait, but I really don't expect anything, you're not going to get anything. Now, it doesn't mean that during that meditation, you're going to hear bells ringing and see fireballs flying. I'd run to the nearest psychiatrist if that's the first thing that happened to me. This is an attuning of every cell in your body and every reflex of the mind to the divine within. You're attuning. What are you lifting in consciousness? What are you bringing to the Lord now? What have you got to offer for him to use? So many people say, well, I've been working at it for a whole week and I've not gotten anything. A whole week! Well, now, if we believe, Cayce, we're millions of years old. That means you too, honey. I just got here before you this time. So what? Remember that to the degree that we have worked at this in other experiences, will we quickly attune? Let me share with you my first experience with Edgar Cayce. And it helped me, of course, tremendously. But, as he said, I've been working at this a long time, so I'm not very smart. I'm just doing the same thing over and over and over again. But he was asking those who were attending one of these conferences if they wanted help in meditation. I didn't even know what the word meditation meant. But as my husband will tell you, I rush in where angels fear to tread. He doesn't always call me a fool, but that's what the statement says, you know. So anyway, I raised my hand, and Mr. Cayce said, well, I'll awaken you at 2 in the morning. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but you can't do that because I don't have a phone in my room. And he said, well, I don't need a phone. Remember, I was new. And I thought, what's this strange man going to do? Is he going to come to my room at 2 in the morning and knock on the door? But he looked sort of harmless, so I thought, well, it's okay. If he says he's going to wake me at 2, I guess he's going to wake me at 2. And the only thing I learned was that I must somehow be thinking about God. I'd only been there once before. And so I was in my room, and somehow I awakened the dark of night, and I quickly looked at my luminous watch, and there it said exactly 2. And I thought, well, it's 2, so somehow he awakened me, and I'll think about God. So I closed my eyes in the dark room, and I saw suddenly a field of orange. And in the center of the field of orange was a large blue eye looking at me. Well, what do you do when an eye looks at you? You look back at it, don't you? I thought this was very exciting, but it didn't really mean anything. It stayed there looking at me like that, and I looked at it. And then I became aware of the room full of the odor of gardenias. Now, I was on the ocean front. Catherine Baird was my roommate, and there were no gardenias around. And I was very fortunate in the morning when Catherine said, Elsie, did you smell gardenias during that? Because I really thought I'd lost some marbles. You know, after all, this was a very new experience for me. So I couldn't wait till I could see Mr. Cayce and ask him about an experience that I'd had. And he said, well, before you tell me, now he already knew I was going to tell him, because he said, before you tell me, let me tell you of a dream I had before I awakened you. He said, I dreamed that we were walking in the garden, and you asked me for help in meditation. And I said to you, well, you need to meditate through the all-seeing eye. And you said to me, that's not enough. I also need the odor of gardenias. And, of course, I found that since then, the all-seeing eye has been very important. 3 phases of my life of the all-seeing eye has appeared. And when my book, Dreams Your Magic Mirror, came out with that big blue eye on it, Hugh Lynn says, gee, that was clever. You know, you're thinking about getting that blue eye on that book of yours. I said, I had nothing to do with it. He said, what? You mean you didn't tell the artist? I said, I didn't know what they were going to put on. Well, there's that great big blue eye that even moves. It shifts and looks at you. So this was the 3rd experience of the blue eye, but this was my first experience at meditation. And, of course, as a result of this first very dramatic experience, it gave me the impetus and the energy and the verve to look. And so meditation, you get out of it exactly what you have put into your life the day before. You cannot expect to rise in consciousness tonight in meditation if today I've acted like a heel. Because what I've done today is going to go in to my meditation. Have I acted as a helper to my fellow man today? Then my meditation will be very good. If I haven't, it won't go very far. Because what I am is what goes into my meditation. And the meditation but lifts this creative energy to make you stronger tomorrow. Will you tomorrow be a better person because of the lifting of this energy, the increase of the energy, the increase of the insight? If we don't, our meditations won't rise very high. Only a very imperfect image will be raised, imperfect energies. And we may be in more trouble because the energy lifted is to increase our service for our fellow man. So it isn't a blah state, it's an enthusiastic state, knowing that the Lord will give us exactly what we can use safely and rightly. Do we trust Him? It may be patience we need, because patience is the cornerstone of all growth, spiritual and otherwise. When I was 14, I thought I would never be 16. And then when I got to be 39, why, those years would never stay 39. They just kept zooming away. So patience in all things, in growing old and in growing young. Any other questions? I find that the periods that become difficult is when I haven't been trying as hard as I could that day. And I also have learned, and I'm sure most of you have learned, that you better not try to go into meditation if you had a fuss with anybody. You just better make it right, because your meditation just won't go anywhere. Some of you have heard me tell this story, but I'll tell it again. My husband's present. My husband and I had made a vow when we got married that we would never go to bed angry at one another. And so we kept this. And one night, 10 years ago, we had a fuss. And, you know, Cayce said we were mother and son 6,000 years ago, and we quarreled one with another. It's only been 6,000 years, so it's natural a few sparks still fly occasionally, you know. So anyway, we'd had a fuss. And I said this night, now, I am not going to say I'm sorry tonight. No, sirree, not tonight. So I climbed into my bed, and he climbed into his. In just a minute's time, he was asleep. So I thought, well, if he can go to sleep, I can go to sleep too. So I tried, and I did. I began to doze. And guess what happened? I saw my face and two horns growing right out of my head. So I jumped into his bed, and I put my arms around him. I said, gee, honey, I'm sorry we quarreled. He woke up long enough to say, okay, and went right back to sleep snoring. But guess what? I could go to sleep. In the newspaper the other day, it said another couple had said that they had made that same vow, and said he said, and so we haven't been sleeping for 4 nights. Another question? I think you had one. Well, of course, the question here is in relationship to the experiments in Russia with the oneness of God. Let us not be under the illusion that they are talking about the oneness of God. They're talking about a universal oneness of some kind between all living things. They have not diagnosed what it is, but they are measuring all of this energy as it affects one another. They find that great mental activity of a person at a distance affects a resting person by changing their blood volume. We know about the... is there anybody here who wasn't with us? What night was it the girls were here? Friday night. Is there anybody here who was not here Friday night? Oh, well, let me share with you one of their experiments. How many of you here do not know about Cleve Baxter and his work? Do not know about Cleve? Whoa, I got 2 wonderful stories to tell you. And, of course, they were very interested in the work of Cleve Baxter. And I had already read about their experiment. Now, this is an experiment that they did, which was very shocking to them in the realization that this oneness is even in the animal kingdom. They had taken a mother rabbit and put electrodes deep into her brain and put her in a laboratory where, of course, they could measure her reactions. They took her 5 bunnies, put them in a submarine, and took this submarine to a mile beneath the surface. And then they put each one of these bunnies separately to death. And at exactly the synchronized moment of the death of each bunny, the mother's brain miles away reacted. Now, this gave them quite a shock. So when I told them about Cleve Baxter's latest experiments with the plethysmograph, which is a lie detector device which measures the volume of the sap in the thing. Do you see other people got sap too? You know, plants got sap. That's supposed to be a joke. Anyway, they found, for instance, that a plant will react when tiny shrimp are put into boiling water in the same room, when any living thing dies. So what they did with another experiment, the most dramatic of experiments, which I was able to share with the Russians, was they took 2 plants and put in a room. Then they took 5 men, and they told each one to separately go in the room and walk out. Just walk around the room once and walk out. The last man was told to go in and take one of the plants, tear it out by the roots, tear it into tiny little pieces, and throw it into the wastebasket there. Then they went and put the plethysmograph on the plant. And then they marched these men individually again into the room. And when that person walked in that had murdered the other plant, the plant reacted, pointing out the murderer. Now, if the plants do this for another plant, think how it must react if a human being is murdered. They also discovered, Cleve Baxter also discovered, that if you love your plants, and I bet ours must have been shaking, honey, when we came back from abroad. We were gone 3.5 months. Said that when your plane lands in your hometown, that plant reacts. Now, you know, Cayce has said this. All living things are tied together because God is in and through all things. And while they're not talking about God, they're talking about this energy, the bioplasmic energy, They're using physical terms for all energy, which is fine. It doesn't matter what you call it. We're all going to come up with the same thing, because they are bringing with their experimentation the proof of these things. We are approaching it from a psychological, psychological and philosophical point of view, and spiritual. Now, these are three pieces of the same pie. And in our private discussions, we were able to open up their minds to the fact that there is something besides the physical, that there is the mental, and there is the motivation, because they have discovered that in measuring the brain waves, in a brain that is active in negative thinking, it gives a pattern of a very old, tired brain. And energy in the form of light is pouring from it, from the body, when you're angry. They also find when they're sending negative thoughts to a person who is receptive, waiting for whatever they're thinking, it lowers the white blood count, which is the scavenger of the body, the protector, 1,500. When they send positive, constructive thoughts to that person, it raises the white blood count 1,600. So you see, they can't escape thinking about the positive and the negative and the constructive and so on. Yes, sir? Well, to me, they are showing and proving what Edgar Cayce said, that I, for instance, cannot think negatively without, in some measure, affecting on the unconscious level all living things in my area. That we are responsible for one another's thoughts, negative and positive. That we do affect each other. You're right. Well, of course, many of us have wondered about this statement that, again, the hope of the world lies in Russia. In one statement that I saw, Cayce was talking about the birth of this idea, which was pure communism in the beginning, and that was everyone working for his fellow man, like the early Christians. And not, as he said, as Bolshevism, as it developed, with this force and so on. On the other hand, I think that because religion per se has been suppressed, you can't keep it down. You can't keep the very essence of man's nature down without another force coming up in another direction. And I think that this great research in parapsychology is, in a sense, this spiritual which has been held down on the one and is bursting forth on the other. Because while we don't talk about religion there, while we don't talk about God, we are talking about the great creative forces of the universe. And these tremendous discoveries that are pouring forth. I think that it would be one of the greatest means whereby we become friends with the rest of the world. Through these discoveries, through sharing this with one another. Because the whole world is becoming interested in this inner research into the inner spaces of man.
Then with their proof of negative approaches of force and terror and so forth.
If they will, if we will we first on a personal level use this? Will I stop hating and getting angry and getting even? This is where it starts. Not what will the Russians do, what will we in America do? Will we individually create peace in our home, in our environment, in our church? That's where it's going to start. We're always waiting for somebody else to do it. But it starts right here, said Cayce. He pointed out once to a group of people when he was giving a reading that if only those 60 people present would live as they prayed, not one drop of blood would be shed on American soil. Think of that. The power of 60. Well, we read something about this in the Bible. When one righteous man, he said, in Sodom and Gomorrah would not be destroyed. Because the power of one righteous man spreads so much light that it keeps the spiritual balance. So, again, he would say, what will we do? We individually. Yes, ma'am. Well, you know that in a search for God, these are progressive affirmations that are given. And the first one is really, when you're working on the chapter on meditation, is the Lord's Prayer. And from Edgar Cayce's insight into the Lord's Prayer, it means far more than we were given when we were raised in our Orthodox churches. it is talking to the awareness at the cellular level at each one of the psychic centers, or the chakras, or the spiritual centers of the body. And it is talking about this physical body, this being the heaven, our consciousness. And so the Lord's Prayer is the first, the opening, the understanding of the movement of this consciousness. And then with each chapter, such as cooperation, you have an affirmation that relates to that chapter of helping to make you more sensitive to how you may cooperate with the laws of the Lord first, the laws of the land, of civilization, of your home, of your nation, and so on. And so it's a step-by-step process in the meditations. The affirmations are related to this step-by-step process of the cleansing of these 7 spiritual centers, or contacts, through which the soul works in the physical body. And that's about as much as you can say when you first start, because that in itself is a 3-hour lecture, just talking about the affirmations and what they do as your consciousness is expanded in your effort to be more cooperative with the disciplines that you are given every day, in your study group work. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. How do you do meditation? Well, that's another one of those long, drawn-out things. Very simply, you sit in a chair, a comfortable chair. Your feet flat on the floor. If possible, nothing tight around your body. And you have an affirmation which clears your mind, and then in silence, you listen. Well, if there aren't any other questions, well, we thank you all very much, and God bless you.
Hope everyone enjoyed our presentation from the archives today with Elsie Sechrist. Don't forget to pick up Elsie's timeless books, Dreams, Your Magic Mirror, and Meditation, Gateway to Light. Both are available on our website at arecatalog.com. I encourage everyone to become an ARE member and tap into the unlimited resources that are poured out of the Edgar Cayce readings and the kindred material. I can only speak for myself, but the material can be potentially life-changing, and I think everyone can agree, more so now than ever, we really need change. On behalf of everyone here at the Association for Research and Enlightenment, and of course, MoreTalk.tv, I'm your host, Brenton Bickerstaff, reminding you that awakening and enlightenment are an ever-unfolding process. The moment you think you've awoken or have achieved enlightenment is the moment you begin to stray from your path. Stay hungry and stay humble. There is so much that is yet to be revealed. Thank you so much for joining us this week on Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. Hope everyone has a healthy, joy-filled week. Much love.